James Kaulia, president of the Hui Aloha Aina, the Hawaiian Patriotic League, gave a stirring speech before thousands at Palace Square in Honolulu. He said agreeing to annexation was like agreeing to being buried alive. He asserted that a mass refusal by the people could prevent annexation.
Let us take up the honorable struggle. Do not be afraid. Be steadfast in aloha for your land and be united in thought. Protest forever the annexation of Hawaii until the very last patriot lives.
A petition to the President, Congress, and people of the United States, otherwise known as the Monster Petition, was read and approved at this rally, asking that no further steps be taken toward the ratification of the treaty. The men and women of the Hui Aloha Aina, through the efforts of many loyal and dedicated Hawaiian subjects, launched a full-scale petition drive that lasted approximately 2 months. They went from island to island, from shore to shore, leaving no stone unturned in their efforts to document opposition to the proposed treaty. The petition was printed in both English and Hawaiian.
We, the undersigned, Native Hawaiian subjects and residents who are members of the Hawaiian Patriotic League of the Hawaiian Islands and other citizens who are in sympathy with the League, earnestly protest against the annexation of the Hawaiian Islands to the United States of America in any form or shape.
The Hui Aloha Aina was founded specifically to support the Queen and to protest annexation. They described the men's branch as 7,500 men from the different islands and the women's branch as 11,000 women. The women did a lot of the work. Mrs. Laura Mahelona went to Kona and Ka'u, and she went, in those days, of course there was no airplane, so there were these steamer mail boats, that would go to every village once a week or so and deliver the mail. So her method was she went from North Kona down to Ka'u, stopped in every village along the way.
Ani went for a ride in her carriage. On her way back, she told her driver not to turn into the palace, but instead to take her to her private residence, Washington Place. She firmly believed her exile would be brief, that the United States would recognize the error and she would be reinstated. On February 1st, Minister Stevens ceremonially raised the American flag over the government building. Liliuo Kalani wrote in her diary, "Time may wear off the feeling of injury, but my dear flag, the Hawaiian flag, that a strange flag should wave over it. May heaven look down on these missionaries and punish them for their deeds." The palace was renamed the Executive Building. Martial law was declared and would be enforced by the ragtag army of the provisional government.
There was a blackening out of things, of news. But our people were able to find a means of protest. Because they were told by their leader, their queen, not to take up arms, they began wearing hatbands that said Aloha Aina, that meant patriotism. They began to make quilts that had the Hawaiian flag because the Hawaiian flag had been banned.
Here she was denied all reading material except for her prayer book. During this time, she composed a number of pieces, including the Queen's Prayer. Fearing that she would die a prisoner, Liliuo Kalani embroidered a quilt with a record of her life. Lydia Kamakaeha Liliuo Kalani ascended the throne January 29, 1891, dethroned January 17, 1893. Imprisoned at Iolani Palace, we began this quilt there. It was during her imprisonment that she would formally abdicate the throne.
Under the threat that 6 of her people will be executed, she signs a document that is not only an abdication for herself, but a statement that the monarchy itself is over, that the kingdom is no more. The news strikes the Hawaiian people with great force because to them she was still queen.
On September 6, 1895, after 8 months' imprisonment, Liliuokalani was released on parole to Washington Place. It would take another 2 years before her civil rights were fully restored. The provisional government had established the Republic of Hawaii with Sanford Dole as president, but they had still not succeeded in their ultimate goal, annexation to the United States. In 1898, when the Spanish-American War broke out, American troops headed to the Philippines. President McKinley recognized the strategic value of Hawaii and supported a congressional resolution for annexation. On August 12, 1898, in a grand ceremony, President Dole formally yielded the sovereignty and public property of the Hawaiian Islands to the United States. The Stars and Stripes was slowly raised over Iolani Palace, and the Hawaiian flag was brought down for the last time. But few Hawaiians would witness the ceremony. Most spent the day at home, behind closed blinds.
On the actual day of annexation, the Queen shuttered herself at Washington Place, surrounded by her court, by the princes, by her ladies-in-waiting, and they had a solemn picture taken. On the other side at Iolani Palace, there were sharpshooters pointed out. There was still tension in the air that something might happen, but when the Hawaiian flag was lowered, it was said that it was cut into small little 2 to 3 inch ribbons and given out as tokens of remembrance to the sons and daughters of the missionary families, so that they could keep those as little tokens of their great victory over the Hawaiian kingdom and the end of the tyranny of the Hawaiian monarchy.
Liliuokalani would live for another 20 years as an American citizen in the United States territory of Hawaii. By the time of her death at the age of 79, she had become the embodiment of the kingdom itself and of its loss. For weeks after her funeral, strange events were recorded in the islands. Volcanoes erupted, and the seas turned an odd hue from the sudden appearance of a multitude of red fish. It was as if the elements recognized that the kingdom was no more.
Now, even though it did not yield for us immediately the benefits, the fact that we have hung on to that particular method of resolving conflicts and are now on the verge of being able to produce the results of that is going to be a very, very strong message to the world that Hawaii has succeeded in restoring its nation and its integrity and its position in the world because they played by the rules and did so with grace and with aloha. You That's going to speak very, very loudly to the international community of how conflicts and how disputes can be approached, should be approached. And so we're expecting, as Hawaii succeeds in restoring our nation, that this will send a loud message of aloha to the world. For most people who are visiting Hawaii, they don't realize that Hawaii actually is a kingdom. It's a kingdom remaining from the 19th century and continuing on. But there is an overlay, of course, of what is called the state of Hawaii, and that's what most people see and relate to. We're, as Hawaiian nationals, as sovereigns and citizens of the Hawaiian Kingdom, we are actually looking to try to change that perception, not only recapture our nation, but to change the perception that people have about us. So we still are the Hawaiian Kingdom, although it's being occupied or captured by the United States as a state of Hawaii. So most people who come here are not aware of that at all. So we're trying to make people aware. Yeah. Yes, I think that Hawaii is such an unusual situation in that when this adversity appeared on our doorstep, we handled it diplomatically. We handled it the way that the United Nations decided 60 years later how to handle things, that we ought to be doing it through negotiations, through international law, and all that. Now, even though it did not yield for us immediately the benefits, the fact that we have hung on to that particular method of resolving conflicts and are now on the verge of being able to produce the results of that is going to be a very, very strong message to the world that Hawaii has succeeded in restoring its nation and its integrity and its position in the world because they played by the rules and did so with grace and with aloha. That's going to speak very, very loudly to the international community of how conflicts and how disputes can be approached, should be approached. And so we're expecting, as Hawaii succeeds in restoring our nation, that this will send a loud message of aloha to the world. Yeah. The Hawaiian Kingdom was actually a functioning nation among nations, recognized by all of the other nations of the world as a sovereign state or nation state. And there were some people, disgruntled people within Hawaii called the sugar planters. They were also the wealthiest people and had amassed a great amount of wealth growing sugar and trading that sugar with the United States. So they really conspired to think that if they could annex Hawaii to the United States and make Hawaii a part of the United States, then that would improve their market position within the United States. And they were also able to find co-conspirators in the United States government, primarily in the military, saying that Hawaii could offer the United States a very excellent naval base called Pearl Harbor. And so the two powers conspired, and they cooked up this scheme that if there was an overthrow of the regime change in Hawaii, and those that overthrew the government were to offer it to the United States, that the United States would gladly annex the Hawaiian Islands. So that was the basic scheme, and that's what was pulled off. Now, none of this, of course, was legal, because the United States had treaties with the Hawaiian Kingdom, treaties of friendship and of respect for our sovereignty, and things like that. So this was definitely an illegal action on the part of the United States to participate in what is now called regime change, to change over the regime of another country for the purpose of taking over that country. So that is actually a criminal endeavor on the part of a nation taking over another nation. But nevertheless, they went ahead with the scheme. The scheme was exposed early on and was shown to be patently illegal. The first president of the United States, who looked at the situation after the overthrow had taken place, admitted that the United States had committed an act of violations of international law and possibly an act of war against a friendly nation. And so he recanted that and basically said that the United States cannot pursue annexation of a friendly nation without that nation's consent. So he actually made an agreement with Queen Liliuokalani, who had been deposed, but he made an agreement to restore her as the sovereign of the independent country of Hawaii. That agreement is actually in limbo right now. It has never been executed, although it was agreed upon. However, a few years later, when President Cleveland, who made that agreement, was out of office, then the conspirators within the United States who wanted to take over Hawaii pushed again for annexation. By now, there was a provisional government in place and what was called the Republic of Hawaii. There was a regime change in that they did create a new nation, or out of scratch, out of nowhere, and created this Republic of Hawaii. So the Republic of Hawaii entered into an agreement with the United States to annex the Republic of Hawaii to the United States. This was received by quite a few members of Congress. They were very receptive to it. They would have had to approve it. But the Hawaiian people themselves, of course, protested and filed a very strong protest where they took up a petition of Hawaiian nationals, those who are nationals of the Hawaiian Kingdom, and that over 90% of the Hawaiian nationals signed that petition resisting or opposing annexation to the United States. So when it finally got to the Congress of the United States, to the Senate, for ratification, it was turned down because they did not have the consent of the people of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And so Queen Liliuokalani, who had been in Washington lobbying against it, returned home quite victorious because we had defeated any treaty of annexation. Within a year, so in a few months' time, the United States had provoked a war with Spain to try to oust Spanish influence from the Western Hemisphere. And so the war began against Spain, and it went very quickly. Most of it was fought in Manila and Puerto Rico, and Cuba, in Havana. But the Manila part of it, which is in the Philippines, was the part that involved Hawaii. So the United States, in prosecuting their war with Spain in 1898, decided to go ahead and seize Hawaii to be used as a base. So they used a false, or the premise of what is called a joint resolution of Congress to, quote, acquire Hawaii as a territory of the United States, under the excuse of military necessity, meaning they needed the military base here, so therefore they would simply acquire Hawaii to be that military base. After the Spanish-American War, which was fairly short, then Spain then yielded and signed over several of its territories to the United States, Hawaii not being one of them because Hawaii was an independent country. But the United States simply proceeded as if Hawaii were a part of the spoils of war, and basically treated Hawaii as a territory acquired during the Spanish-American War through their joint resolution. So none of this is lawful. And the people of Hawaii protested that quite strongly, but those protests were overlooked, and the nations that we had treaties with failed to come to our aid to stick up for the fact that Hawaii is still a sovereign nation. And so the United States simply subsumed the Hawaiian Kingdom as the Republic of Hawaii, and then into the United States as a territory of Hawaii. And then embarked on a very strong Americanization of Hawaii at that point. So several generations later, they succeeded in practically wiping out any memory of Hawaii having been an independent nation on par with all the other nations. The North American natives were also, of course, unlawfully displaced, or their lands were seized, and their people were incorporated into the United States. The difference is that Hawaii was actually a sovereign state with a treaty on the same level as an equal in sovereignty to the United States, as well as to Great Britain and France and others. So there is a difference there in its stature and its protection under international law. So the United States has always treated the problems with the nations, with American Indian nations, as a domestic problem. But that is what they are attempting to do now with the Hawaiian Kingdom, to treat this as a domestic problem. And so the thing that is most glaring is that when we began to find out about the anomalies about what happened in 1890s and the takeover of the Hawaiian Kingdom, we started to really discover this in the 1970s. And by the 1990s, we became quite aware of it, to the point where the United States actually issued an apology for the taking of our nation without our people's consent. And that apology was issued in 1993, signed by Congress and by the President of the United States. So it became clear at that point that the United States knew exactly what it had done. It also became clear that the United States was now beholden to doing something to rectify or to resolve the situation of this inequitable taking over of another nation. So the United States set out to try to resolve it by treating Hawaii as an Indian nation, saying these are the parameters within the United States law that we can deal with the Hawaiian people. And in so doing, they neglected or failed to acknowledge the fact that this was an international breach of a breach of international law, not a breach of domestic law. And so the United States has been, since 1993, attempting to fix the matter under domestic law. But the more they attempt to do it, the more apparent it becomes that there is a real problem, that they are using the wrong remedy for the wrong illness or ailment. The Hawaiian people have, over the years, because of these attempts by the United States, have become much more aware of the fact that there is a problem here, and that the United States is trying desperately to solve the problem using its own solutions, and neglecting or simply not paying attention to the real solution, which is the return of the nation to the people of that nation. Of course, many people consider Hawaii being a part of the United States as a blessing, that we have acquired, of course, much of the protection of the United States, the industry, and these types of things. Under regular circumstances, that would seem like a very good thing. The problem is that we have been disenfranchised from benefiting from the use of our lands and our country. And Hawaiians are right now, native Hawaiians, are on the bottom rung of all the social measurements that you have. So we're the most incarcerated people, we have most homeless, the most number in poverty, illnesses, and these types of things are all afflicting the Hawaiians. And much of it has to do with the separation of the Hawaiians from their land and from nature, from the natural sustenance that they gain from the land. And the land has been redeveloped many times over, and those that have profited from it are not the Hawaiians, but others. And so we're at the point now where we are not receiving any benefits of the lands and not having any say in the land use. In the recent years, there have been many confrontations over land use, be it the rail, the disturbance of sacred sites, burial sites and things like that. This past year, Mauna Kea, the sacred mountain. All of these types of controversies point to the fact that the Hawaiians have not been consulted or considered in the decisions to utilize or to exploit these resources. We look at the buildings around us and the growth of Waikiki, downtown Honolulu, and all over, and we see that the Hawaiians did not benefit from that, nor did we participate or give any consent into this. So, yes, we benefit because we're part of this society, but we had no say in it, and we also are at the bottom part of the society as a result. Now, what is happening in a global sense is that after World War II, there was a coming together of nations called the United Nations, and they decided that there were two main objectives that the United Nations would tackle. The first was to seek peaceful resolution to any conflicts, to try to put an end to all wars, and that was their main thing. The second was to decolonize the world, to stop the exploitation of stronger nations over weaker nations, and really literally the enslavement of these nations under an administrative nation. So decolonization became a huge goal of the United Nations as well as the world community. And in greater part, they did succeed. Over the 70 years of the United Nations existence, a great part of the world has been decolonized. Hawaii was slated to be part of that decolonization effort. But in 1959, the United States schemed to make Hawaii appear as if we had chosen to become part of the United States, to be integrated within the United States. And so there was a manufactured plebiscite with a manufactured consent. And so there are many questions about that particular move, but the effect that it had was it made it appear as if the Hawaiians had exercised the right to self-determination and had determined that the future of Hawaii laid as a state of the United States. So it was a very, very diabolical scheme, but it worked on the part of the United States, again, until, of course, when you start to examine how the United States came to acquire Hawaii. So the apology that the United States issued really lined up with the real facts, that the United States had no business claiming Hawaii was a territory of the United States, therefore had no business taking a vote in the Hawaiian Islands to join the United States. So the reason that we are looking toward, there's a number of different reasons. One is self-determination, to be able to determine for ourselves what we want to do with our own land, to be able to utilize that land to our benefit, as well as to the world's benefit, but to be able to be the ones who make that decision. The other part, of course, is the spiritual connection of the people to the lands, which is extremely important, not only to Hawaiians, but to people everywhere. So when the decolonization process went into place, much of that kind of spiritual reconnection of the peoples to the land occurred, and this is how we're able to function as the United Nations now has 193 members. They started out with 51 in 1946. So the community of nations is actually a benefit to everybody because it treats each other as equal. Right now, the state of Hawaii, or the Hawaiian Kingdom, is not being treated as an equal on par with all the other nations because we have been subsumed into the United States. So the benefits that we're looking for are to be able to govern ourselves, to be able to determine our future, and to be able to put our own style of governance into our nation and not be simply a knockoff of the United States. Over the years, because of Hawaii's receptivity to people from all over, and particularly early on to the Asians, the Chinese and the Japanese came to the Hawaiian Islands under the Hawaiian Kingdom to live here, to work here and live here and prosper. And then, so we actually have sort of an automatic international community, almost like a United Nations community that sprang up here in the 19th century and has since become a part of the whole fabric of our islands. So you have the Puerto Ricans, you have the Filipinos, you have the Japanese, the Koreans, numerous others that were part of the fabric of our nation.